Dear Mr. Pichai, dear Volker Markl, welcome and thank you all for coming to today's event, Fostering Responsible Innovation, a conversation with Google CEO Sundar Pichai. The event is of great significance for the university. TU has taken a leading role in the field of researching artificial intelligence in Berlin. Berlin in general, in particular TU Berlin, is a very attractive location for artificial intelligence. There are more than 180,000 students in the Berlin area, 35,000 at TU Berlin, and of those, about 5,000 study computer science in one way or other at TU Berlin alone. There are several centers that we work on artificial intelligence. That's the Berlin Big Data Center at TU Berlin. Volker Markl is the director. That's the Competence Center of Machine Learning. Klaus-Robert Müller is the director. And there's the Cluster of Excellence, which is entitled Science of Intelligence. The director is Oliver Brock from Computer Science. The scientists involved there jointly explore the fundamental laws and principles underlying different forms of intelligence, be it artificial, individual, or collective. We're always pleased to welcome guests from all over the world, above all in order to give students the opportunity to get up-to-date insights into developments outside of the scientific landscape. The students here were able to submit questions in advance. About 300 of you did that. The topics are integrated into the conversation between Sundar Pichai and Volker Markl in a few minutes. Just a few words on Sundar's bio. Sundar received a bachelor's degree from the Indian Institute of Technology. He holds a master's degree from Stanford University and MBA from Wharton School. As Google's chief executive officer, Sundar is responsible for Google's product development and technology strategy, as well as the company's day-to-day operations, which I think must be a challenging task. Sundar joined Google in 2004 and helped lead the development of Google Toolbar and Google Chrome, key consumer products which are now being used by over 1 billion people. In 2014, he took over product engineering and research efforts for all of Google's products and platforms. This includes search, maps, communications, Google Play, commerce, and ads, as well as our suite of cloud-based solutions for consumers, businesses, and education known as Google Apps and Cloud Platform. Sundar became Google's CEO in August of 2015. I wish you all a pleasant and exciting day today. Mr. Pichai, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you, President Thompson and Professor Markl, for inviting me here today. It's an honor to be here. I'll be honest with you, I love my work as CEO, but some of my favorite days are when I'm surrounded by engineers and students, so this is a very good day for me. Like all of you, I went to a technical university. I did so in India. I grew up there. Growing up in India, the culture of knowledge was very valued, and learning was encouraged. So university was a natural second home to me, and I have many, many fond memories, none of which actually included a lecture, so I'll actually keep my remarks pretty brief. Google has a long history in Germany. We opened our first German office 18 years ago. That's before Chrome, Android, YouTube, and actually 3 years before I joined Google in 2004. That means from our earliest days, German engineering and creativity have helped shape how we approach our mission, to organize the world's information and to make it universally accessible and useful. Google continues to invest heavily in Europe. We employ over 16,000 people across 39 cities and 25 countries in our EMEA region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. In Europe, we have invested more than 4.3 billion euros in 5 data centers since 2007, generating more than 5.4 billion euros in GDP over the last decade. Between 2014 and 2017, our creator, publisher, and app partners in our EMEA region earned more than $22 billion using our AdSense, YouTube, and Google Play platforms. After this talk, I'll head over to help open our newest office here in Berlin, across from Museum Island. The new space can house about 300 Googlers, and they work across our team, including policy, sales, cloud, YouTube, and our latest hub for digital training and education. Berlin is also home to several Google AI researchers who are working to make our products even more helpful to everyone. We have 3 other offices in Germany, including our headquarters in Hamburg, our engineering center in Munich, and our office in Frankfurt. Many of our important security and privacy products were developed by German engineers. It's a great time to be an engineer, especially here in Berlin, a capital of culture, media, and a fast-growing startup scene. So I look forward to talking more about the opportunities. So thank you.
So please have a seat. So I would like to personally extend a warm welcome to Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, to the Technische Universität Berlin, one of the leading science universities in Germany and Europe. So I, during this morning, would like to discuss your views on a variety of topics, including AI technology, ethics, also the educational path to AI, about you, about Google, and about research, and of course about the competitive landscape. And we have, Mr. Thomsen already has mentioned that before, received more than 300 questions from students, which I will also relay during the discussion. But so for you, you have been at Google now for roughly 15 years, and you have led many different products. I remember Google Gears also from some time ago, but Toolbar, and of course, most importantly, Chrome. So during that tenure, you've been able to witness the rise of this new wave of AI technology and also its use in Google products. So what I was wondering is, what has surprised you most about the AI technologies and the applications in Google during your tenure?
First of all, it's great to be here. To your point, we had always at Google, today what we call off as machine learning, we had done some form of it early on in our products. When we launched Gmail, how we went about spam detection in Gmail, or so how we did ranking in search. So we had some notion of machine learning. I would say what surprised me was, I quite didn't expect the computational breakthroughs, which we started having later, which just made the whole technique so much more effective than any of us expected. Today, we widely use it across all our products. If you look at search now, we use machine learning quite a bit to rank search. Last year, I don't know if you try using Gmail, when you type, we have a feature called Smart Compose, so we kind of predict a few things you can potentially type there, right? And all of that is powered by machine learning. So it's been this kind of a cross-cutting technology, which is applying across all our products. The camera technology, which based on software, what you can do, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty pervasive across everything we do.
Yeah, in that respect, given this new wave of AI technology, what do you think we can realistically expect in the next 5 years? So are there some areas that are overrated, where the potential is overrated that you see? And also, where should we not use AI, maybe?
For sure, I would say, it's kind of, I feel both. I feel that both AI is overhyped, as well as it's also underhyped. We tend to overestimate technology in the near term and underestimate it in the long term. And there's no doubt that AI is one of the most profound things we'll ever work on as humanity. But we are in very early days. I get frustrated by all the things I want to be able to do or ask the teams to do, and the limitations we have in our systems. But the progress is fast. It's good that it's early, because we can actually make sure we develop it safely and in a beneficial way. But I do think there's a lot of hype, but in some ways I view it as a positive thing. It attracts people to the field. I think it's really important the current generation embraces it, and I think it's going to be a big part of their future.
In that respect, one of those big challenges in AI or in the current world that I actually see is the trustworthiness of information. And obviously, we can have AI technologies help with that through fact-checking, filter bubbles. I recently attended a play in New York, The Lifetime of a Fact. Also, there recently was a journalist in Germany on the news magazine Der Spiegel that was faking and fabricating stories. So fact-checking seems to play an important role. So what role can AI technology play there, or what role does Google see in that context?
I mean, it's core to our mission, right? I mean, we want to give people highly accurate and trusted information. Last year, probably if you take 2018, we handled trillions of searches. And even if we get it correct 99.109s, that may still account to a lot of mistakes. And the one good thing about search is everyone sees what everyone else sees. So when we make a mistake, the world notices it. And so, and so trying to make sure the information is accurate is, I feel, core of what Google does. It's definitely challenging, and I worry about a future where both, technology always has a dual purpose, and the same technology with which we can do our job better is what bad actors can use. So we have to worry about fake videos, fake audio, what we call deep fakes, and so those are the kinds of things we're beginning to do early research on. But we today do a good job of, I think understanding objective facts is easier. Where it gets harder is when the world is divided. There are many subjective areas in which how do you reflect what is a better thing to portray, and those are the things which are definitely more difficult to do.
Absolutely. So the interesting thing is in our questions that we received from the students, just to read it out to you, there were several topics, and we tried to cluster the topics. So there were more than 300 questions, 50 of those cover the future of AI. There was a lot of questions about AI and ethics, which we will go into, about Google products, and several questions about the life of a CEO, which I think are of particular interest also to the students here. What's your work like? And so one question that I thought was quite interesting was, how do you manage your daily work? How do you stay up to date with all the latest updates and requirements of your role? So what's the secret?
I'm not sure I've fully figured it out. We have, Google has a lot of talented people, so I rely on very good people. When you run a large company, a lot of it's very easy where if you don't fight it, the company actually runs you. You're not running the company, right? And so, you can easily get into a situation where your schedule gets fully booked, and you're doing what everyone else in the company wants you to do. And so a lot of what I try to think about is how to resist that, and how do I carve out time to make sure I do what I think is important. And so every year I try to write down the 10 things I want to accomplish that year, or on a quarterly basis maybe the 3 things I want to get done. And if I make progress on 1 or 2 of those things, I think it's very good. So I try hard to make sure I have time for product and technical reviews, and try and set my schedule versus the system setting your schedule. And it's pretty hard, but yeah.
And what time does technology and engineering still play for you compared to the non-engineering parts of the job?
For sure, as a global company which impacts, we have billions of users around the world, and I think engaging with the external world is a naturally important part of what we do. Tech has definitely gotten much larger. It's impacting society at scale. With that comes scrutiny, which I think is good. Society should scrutinize it, and so that does take up more of my time. But I do try to carve out time to make sure I spend time on, with the product teams, with engineers to actually help build our products.
And in that respect, another question was, can you share an example for any of your decisions in your life, career as a CEO, or any assumptions you made which turned out to be wrong in the future? Some things you would prefer to rectify if you get a second chance?
It's a good question. By the way, I'm happy to take live questions too, to the extent people have them. A lot of, when you're in the technology world, things are constantly changing, and it's more than, if you think about it, every 10 years or so, the world changes. In the 80s, we had the PC industry, mid-90s, the internet, and mid-2000s, the smartphones came, and we are now in the age of AI, and so things change every 10 years, so you're constantly trying to predict the future. I think there are things which, you try to think and time things, and sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you get it wrong. I'll tell you an example of where I think we got it wrong and where we got it right. And VR, AR has been an area where we are all trying to decide what pace at which you invest, how do you predict when it's going to move forward. I think a lot of us rushed into it, and while we were doing it, it was clear the first wave, the consumer experience is nowhere close to being ready. But we all invested in it, and maybe we didn't ship great products the first time we shipped it, and so it's a kind of, you learn that you timed it wrong. An example of a timing I think we got right is, you're talking about machine learning today. We were one of the earliest companies to invest in custom machine learning hardware, what we call as TPUs now. And I remember getting for 50 million euros or something, this is many years ago, people saying we want to build custom chips for machine learning. And you have to make the decision whether it's the right thing to do. And I think we invested early and we got that decision right. But there are definitely, I'm constantly trying to predict that wave of technology and try and get it right. And so it's like, you're trying to do it well. It's like downhill skiing. You make a mistake, and next thing you know, you hurt yourself. So,
yeah, on a related note, so as you said, you have been designing TPUs, new processors. So one important aspect of Google seems to be that Google owns the entire stack, if you wish, from infrastructure, hardware, software, to the applications, so all together. And even though you are, on the one hand, making a lot of your revenue in advertising, you are at core an IT company. So how crucial is this holistic approach of, if you wish, software, hardware, co-design for the company and for your overall strategy and success?
I think it plays an important part. If you go back all the way to Google, when Google started, we built our own Linux servers, we built our data centers. I think that kind of vertical integration allows you to iterate much faster and have true insights. I think the reason we could develop custom machine learning hardware is because we were writing the machine learning algorithms on top of it, and so we have that iterative loop. But we do believe in opening it up to everyone. And while we work across the stack, I think as a company, we really care about democratizing AI access. I think it's super important that AI works for everyone. So be it TensorFlow, or we even provide our TPUs for research, or we expose it through our cloud offering. I think it's important everything we do inside, we want to make sure it's available as APIs and platforms to the external world.
So that means, in that respect, you mentioned TensorFlow as an example. So what role for this democratization, but also if I shift to another topic, which is to research and collaborations, maybe with universities, which role does open source technology and open innovation play for Google?
If you look at, I've spent a lot of my time working on open source technologies. Chrome, Android, everything is open, and Google wouldn't be here without Linux and what Linux helped early on. I think it's up to us to make sure the next generation has the set of innovation will come everywhere. I think one of the great things about what's happened over the last 10 years is you see innovation not just in the US happening around the world, including in places like Berlin. And making sure we are making that available is key to how we think about it. And anytime you do things as a platform, the leveraged innovation you get on top of it, think about what GPS and smartphones enabled, right? And giving everyone smartphones and having GPS, you completely changes the game in terms of what people can do. And so I think we've always taken that to heart, and and constantly thinking about what technologies we put out as open source.
Yeah, and in this context, you are now opening a research office in Berlin, and you have this history of collaborating with universities. So what, in this particular increasingly complex research space where you have large scales with respect to budget and computing power that you have at Google that most universities wouldn't have, you are aiming at this partnership with universities. So what do you expect from universities? What do you expect from a university like TU Berlin with respect to, on the one hand, of course, collaboration, on the other hand, on research, but then also with respect to students?
For me, when I look at the pace at which we are progressing, and I look at how almost all fields in the future will be impacted by AI, I think it's really important, regardless of whether you're in computer science or not, and making sure you have some exposure to what machine learning and AI is. And so, at a high level, I would encourage all of you to understand it. You could be doing a course on AI and ethics. It doesn't matter that, but just gaining exposure to the technology. I think how we shape how AI rolls out, is super important. In terms of research, we collaborate throughout Google's history. We have collaborated with many universities. We have deep partnerships in Germany. We have several major efforts in Germany on AI, and we collaborate with universities as well. When we do want students to use our compute resources, apply it to problems, and give us new insights and share the research with the world, and that's what we are hoping to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in that respect, you already touched the topic of ethics now with respect to courses. It's currently happening that many companies are establishing ethical guidelines for the development of AI-based products, and there is AI councils. We have one in Germany, we have one in the university, one in the department. So how can companies make use of AI in a responsible way, and how can we consider those ethical guidelines? What does it take from your perspective?
It's an emerging area. I think we've published a pretty comprehensive set of AI principles. We wanted to start the conversation, and our principles are around, how do you develop AI to be beneficial to society? How do you have rigorous testing for safety? How do you have privacy design principles? How do you avoid bias in the systems? How do you make it accountable to humans at the end of the day? And so these are the kind of principles we're beginning to think about, and we wanted to publish it. It's our contract as to how we would develop AI. I think we are encouraging everyone to articulate it, and I think it's early days. And normally, as humanity, we develop technology, then we try to harness it. We always have bad effects of it, but with something as important as AI, the negative effects could be profound. And so, talking about it early on, maybe slowing down development to making sure you're developing it in a safe way, I think is super important. I think this is an area where you need global frameworks, maybe no different from climate change or something where, like you had with the Paris Agreement. I think we need more global frameworks for ethics and safety of AI. It needs to be governments, NGOs, universities, businesses coming together to do it. And so I think it's really important.
And there's, of course, exactly this challenge. Now, so I was, for the German Academy of Science, in a discussion board. I was giving a presentation where we had to discuss the freedom and the responsibility, which are really those two aspects with respect to science and research now, right? So in that context, the question is, should AI be regulated? Now having in mind that on the one hand there should be freedom, on the other hand there's the responsibility. Should it be regulated? And you already alluded to the NGOs and governments and businesses. So what role should those play in setting a framework, setting policies in this fast-moving space of AI?
I definitely think governments have a strong role to play, and I do think regulation will be an important part of it. But I would at this stage approach it where there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of learning. You're laying the foundation for it. You want smart regulation. You don't want to slow down innovation. One of the challenges for a technology like AI is, I feel like the good people need to work as fast on it as people who may use it for bad purposes. So I think you want to have a balance there. It is going to progress globally. I think things we can make sure it is actually happening everywhere. it's not happening in an unequal way. There aren't haves and have-nots when it comes to development of AI. I think all that are important principles. So I think the trick with regulating something at an early stage is you may get it wrong or you may slow it down. And so, I would probably encourage open dialogue, a lot of conversations, building the expertise even within government to understand AI better and take it step by step. Yeah.
And now switching to another topic area, because we have lots of students here and we have received lots of questions also about this educational path to career in AI. And the first thing that lots of students were interested in here is, we are at the university, where would you foresee that we would need to change in education and training? So what should be done maybe differently? And then maybe you could also comment on what, based on the perspective of Google and your perspective as CEO, should be the new desired skill sets for future workers?
One of the, it depends on, one of the biggest things I think we need to change about education especially is, what we think of as continuous skilling and continuous retraining. I think especially, technology does change the nature of work, so I think gone are the days where people could learn something and just assume that alone will carry it for 45 years. So I think continuous reskilling and retraining becomes important, especially, as you work across the segments of population. I think for people here, I said earlier, I would expose yourself to these topics. I think if you're a computer scientist, I would be excited at this moment. I think I would, embrace it. It would allow you, hopefully, AI would, take away some of the burdens of coding and programming over time and help you abstract away and work on, you will be more productive and you'll be able to tackle more problems and deeper problems. So I think it's an opportunity if you're a computer scientist.
So that's exactly one of the next questions, which is, how would AI potentially change the future of work? With respect, you already alluded to, we may have an increased amount of automation. Some jobs may go away. So what would it impact? As you said, computer scientists. We may have computer scientists that might be able to focus more on the abstractions. AI may help us to automatically program. Will we reach a point? I was at a discussion panel some time ago where I said, okay, in the future we may replace management with AI. So what's the future that you foresee there, and what does this mean for the students nowadays, what they should study or focus on in order not to have irrelevant skills and have the right skills?
It's a question I get asked a lot, but the general direction I think it'll happen. So, for example, there are radiologists who ask me, we publish papers around how AI can better diagnose or on certain diseases. So you can look at pathological samples, and you can use machine learning to predict whether a tissue is cancerous or not. And in general, the way I feel is it's not going to the way it'll change the profession is, it'll help radiologists handle some of the burdensome work, using machines, and they will maybe have more time to spend with patients. They can work on more difficult cases and so on. So in general, a lot of the change, I think, for skilled workers will, make them more productive. And so if you're a computer scientist, I think, you'll be able to be more productive and work on deeper problems. That's how I think most of the transition will happen. I do think automation is a concern. We've always, as a society, we've had to deal with the automation, so which has displacement, but it also ends up creating new jobs. The trends aren't always linear. When ATMs came, people predicted, it would displace all tellers, bank tellers, but banks actually opened more branches for a long time, and so they hired more, tellers too. Newer jobs which didn't exist today will come up. So it's a more complicated thing, but I think it's definitely a disruptive thing, and which is why all of us need to work together to do it. But I think for people in this room, I would be excited about the change. Across my travels, one of the important things I realize is, given how much technology will drive the future economy, I think it's important to be positive about it. I think there are countries where you embrace technology, and I think it's really important to do that, and that's what helps you navigate it. And so, technology is going to evolve whether we like it or not. And so, being positive about it and understanding this is all going to make the world better too, and working to make sure it makes the world better is our opportunity, I think.
Absolutely. So a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to discuss here also with Eric Schmidt, and there we also talked about skills. And if I would paraphrase it in a provocative way, Eric Schmidt would have said essentially about the skills students need, well, don't really study marketing. Essentially, what you need to study is, we came up with this concept of the T-shaped student, which is you have to have certain skills in depth, which is part of that T, like in computer science, in technology, math, AI, machine learning. And then, of course, you need to have some breadth. But during the university studies, it's very important to focus on the depth so that you will have a solid depth, whereas the breadth will also come, of course, over time. You will learn some of it on the job later on when you have already been working, like you go for an MBA, like you did, right? So the question for you in that respect now is, what would you advise students with respect to what study programs should they pursue? If we talk about high school graduates, which direction should they study? Or for bachelor's or master's students, what are good areas, good topics to focus on with choosing a career path and an academic program?
When I was in university, I literally had no clue what I wanted to do, and I would encourage most of you to make sure you're, whatever that you're following something which you're genuinely interested in. But I'm a big fan of cross-disciplinary thinking, and so the more you can expose yourself to, thinking in other disciplines. So if you're in engineering, I would do courses in humanities and psychology, and vice versa. And I think trying to with the caveat that you want to be deep in something, but I think reaching out, expanding your interest, and being cross-disciplinary is I think is something which will always help you over time.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Then some question on the competitive landscape, which is obviously managing such a large corporation is a challenging undertaking, in particular in this hyper-competitive climate that we're in. So where do you see the most challenges? Are they from China? Are they from nascent startups? Are they from government regulation? Where do you see the biggest challenges for Google?
If you look at, for every large company, I genuinely think the challenge is more from within, right? And how do you just not get used to being comfortable doing what you've always done well, and how do you constantly push yourself to innovate? And I think above everything else, I think that is the hardest thing as a company you deal with, and what I worry the most about. I think we've always viewed ourselves as a company which works on technology in a deep way and applies it to problems across the board. And we see more opportunities than ever before. So I've always never felt we are constrained by what competition does, but more about, are we working on the most important things which will really impact people at scale, and are we doing it well? I think there is an inherent questions around when you're a big company about you are obviously part of the fabric of society, and out of which comes a sense of responsibility. So compared to being a younger company, I think we think a lot about how do we make sure what we are doing is responsible, it's helpful to society, helpful to people, and I think that increasingly influences our thinking in terms of how we approach things.
Excellent. So I was just thinking, since you said it might be okay to have the audience ask some questions, I would give the audience the opportunity now to ask a few questions that we have not yet covered. We tried to obviously include many of the 300 questions in the shortage of time. It's not possible. So if there are any, we'd be happy to hear them now, and I'd be happy to take them. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, can you speak up a bit louder, please? Yeah, thank you.
You were speaking now a few times about Google making their technology publicly available for everyone. And yet yesterday Google was fined like 40 millions in France, I think, for like not keeping to the European data protection guidelines. What do you comment on that?
So first of all, GDPR, I think was an important piece of regulation. I think privacy is an important human right, and I'm glad Europe led the way in terms of articulating a comprehensive set of regulation, which we are very supportive of, and we have worked very, very hard over 18 months to comply. I think you have to understand whenever there's a new big comprehensive regulation which passes for a company which has been operating for 20 years across many products, you're trying hard to comply with everything. So we are trying to understand exactly where in the ruling we need to make changes, but we're committed to doing so. And I think it's inherently part of when you see something that comprehensive, complying is just something we are very committed to doing, but we have more work left to do that. But I think the higher level, the principle of GDPR is very, very important. We are encouraging other countries to do that. I think to the extent there is a more comprehensive global privacy regulation, I think it serves all of us well.
Here and here.
You've already talked a bit about the dangers of machine learning, for example, with people maybe faking videos, things like that. But what do you think about, what's your view on the more long-term risks of artificial intelligence? Like some thinkers like Elon Musk are worried that maybe within this century, AI might be developed that could be superior to humans, and all of the profound implications which that would have. And I would be very interested in your view on that, and also how do you see, where you see Google's place in that development, and yeah.
I think it's a good question. I think it's important. I share the concerns there. I think it's important to be serious about the concerns, and AI is definitely one of the most profound things we are going to work on. And it's important to understand that it is going to progress. It's beyond one company, beyond one country. I think there is going to be forward progress of the technology, and which is why I think doing it in a globally cooperative way where it's possible, being public about the work you do, committing to safety principles, ethical principles, all that will end up mattering. The good news I can tell is, we actually are working on AI at Google. It's really early, right? You can't, our AI systems, as Professor Markl can tell you, can't do many things which a third grader can do. And so we are definitely in early stages. And I do think, we need to work hard to make sure AI progresses in a way in which it helps humanity. And I think that's a deep principle which we need to strive for. So I would take the concern seriously, but I would take it constructively. I won't get paralyzed by it. I think that the last thing you can do is to stop working on it. That's probably the worst way to deal with it. I think it's important to take the concern seriously, but not get paralyzed by it, and make thoughtful progress towards doing it. We have navigated many difficult technologies before, and I think this is no different. It's probably more challenging than most things, but I would worry about climate change equally today. In fact, maybe I would worry about it a bit more than the scenario you're talking about.
I think there were some questions there, and then also here.
First of all, good morning, Mr. Pichai. I recently saw a video of you testifying before the US Senate. I don't want to sound arrogant, but there were some really stupid questions. That's what I like to know as future engineers and sort of like entrepreneurs. What would our role be in educating the politicians as we've seen? Because I like to think it's the fear of the unknown that made them ask those questions. That's why I'm asking if what was your experience like?
I mean, so a few things, dealing with policymakers globally in a representative democracy, the politicians are representing the constituents. And so in some ways, it's important to understand that. They're reflecting real concerns of people as how they are experiencing technology, their actual concerns and their fears about it. So I think it's important to understand it. I'm actually very optimistic. Throughout my dealings, I find more than ever before, politicians and policymakers, there's a whole new generation of policymakers who I think are very, very savvy. For example, in Europe, I have met with people, be it in the European Parliament, who are very, very understanding of important issues like privacy, or AI. And so there's a new generation which really knows what they are talking about, and I think it's increasing. And so from our standpoint, we view our role as to make sure we engage very constructively. We educate where we can. I think universities will end up playing a big role. Hopefully, you're training future policymakers and politicians here as well. So I think it's a change which will happen gradually, but I think we'll make progress.
Something here. And then
Go ahead.
Well, good morning. I got a question about Google's culture, because, for example, Google is pushing a very culture-inclusive kind of culture, but a person like James Damore offered a different perspective, and he got fired on the spot for it. So I'm wondering if this is a good approach for the future, that Google, as a big company, is able to push society aspects, because it's such a very important and big tech giant, and it's not democracy organized or something. So we've got a big company like Google who can push an agenda without a democratic influence. So what's your point on people like James Damore who offer a different perspective, and it's just, well, get out of here, James?
So, as a company, there are two things, right? When as a set of products we build, we stand for freedom of expression. We give various platforms for people to express themselves. And it's part of our core mission. So even when we, internally within the company, we take that to heart, more than any other company I've known. If you're within Google, somebody told me there are 1 million groups we have created at Google over the past year. So people can express themselves in many, many different ways. But also it's important to understand sometimes you're running a company, you're running a business, you want to have a culture in which everyone is respected and people feel like they can all participate fully in the workplace. So as part of that, we have to make decisions on where you draw a line, right? When you're running, no different from any organization, you have codes of conduct. And, when people violate codes of conduct, we make decisions. But we are very careful as a company to foster a culture of open debate, transparency, and we strive hard to do that. And we don't penalize people for political beliefs or religious beliefs or something like that. But we do have a code of conduct, and I think it's important as a company we do that as well. So it's a balance.
So there were some questions here.
So this is maybe a bit of a personal question. I'm sure that you have a lot of responsibilities as a CEO, and it's required to perform, to upkeep a certain level of productivity. So is there a certain morning routine that you enjoy which helps you keep up with that?
I'm a late night person, so mornings are definitely not my strength. Coffee helps. I still have, I still, even today, I read a physical newspaper. It's the way, to the extent you talk about routine, I always try to start my day reading a newspaper. It helps me understand what's going on in a more tactical way, in a way I can feel the real world and what's happening. So it's part of how I wake up and with my cup of coffee and newspaper, and I still do that before I get started. But so beyond that, I don't know. nothing other insightful, I think.
So I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions. So there's somebody here in the front, and then maybe somebody here, and somebody here in this area.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering about, we already talked a little bit about the political landscape, and worldwide we can see that there's a move to the right. There's a prospering of nationalist movements, and in Europe we have that, and in America we have President Trump. And I'm wondering about, what do you think, is there a danger to the technology world from these kind of nationalists and right-wing movements all over the world cropping up?
As a company, I do think, through any phase, not necessarily related to this, I would just say I've always felt more than ever before, giving information, accurate and relevant and trusted information is more important than ever before. And I would take democratic processes seriously, and I think we should need to respect and understand why things are happening and respect that. I've always felt that way. I grew up in a democracy, and I think when you see representative outcomes, I think it's important to respect that. From our goal, we view it as how do we think of ourselves as a global company, but we want to be local in the places we operate in. I think we feel that responsibility. And so, for example, in our large markets, over time, we want to actually hire more people locally, invest more in the countries. I think that's the right thing to do. From a product standpoint, we want to really double down on what we want to do, which is provide information and work harder than ever before to make sure we are providing accurate information to our users. So that's how I think about it at a high level.
Mm-hmm. So then I think we had this lady here in the front was trying to get a question for a while.
Yeah.
And then maybe over there.
Hi. Well, it's actually a personal question. I suppose that you travel a lot and you meet a lot of people every day, different nationalities, different backgrounds. And I'm wondering what surprised you about someone else? What kind of characteristics you say, wow? A good wow. I mean, well, because I suppose that there are a lot of smart people around you. You are smart people too. But what makes you say, wash, I want to meet that person more?
Well, 2 things which make me go say, wow. One is, I can never multitask. I can only do one thing at a time. And, especially in the younger generation, even my daughter, I see her, I don't know how she does math that way. She has loud music and, and she's doing her homework. And I could be talking on the phone, but she somehow is listening to what I'm saying as well. I have no idea how people do that. And, I'm always, even at work, there are people who can be talking, who can be sending emails, and I always find that a superpower. I can only do one thing at a time. So, so maybe that's the thing that impresses me the most. The second is I don't know how to nap. Whenever I run into people who know how to nap, I'm always blown away. I came from the US to Germany, and I'm jet lagged. It's like, but I don't know how to nap in the middle of the day. And I'm with my people, some of my coworkers, and they can kick back and I don't know. I would love to be able to do that. So
you mentioned before that when you were in the university, you were not quite so sure that what you wanted to do, and now you are CEO of Google. So can you briefly talk about your journey from there to here, like what worked, what didn't work?
So I couldn't quite see where the question came from, but I always had, growing up for me, I didn't have much access to technology. I never had access to computers most of my time growing up. But every piece of technology I got access to, it was a big difference in our lives. We waited about 5 years to get our first telephone, and But when the telephone came to our house, it changed my life, overnight. And I've talked about it before. Like before that, if I need to get blood test results for my mom, I would take a 2-hour trip to the hospital, and they would tell me, sorry, it's not ready, come the next day. And once the phone came, I could call and find out whether it was ready or not. So every single piece of technology I got, I saw how it changed our lives. So it always left me with a very positive view of how technology can improve people's lives. And so I always wanted to be a part of that. Wanted to really work on something which could impact the lives of billions of people. And so it was kind of a guiding thing which I wanted to do. And that's what led me to Google. And that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing today.
So maybe one very last question, and that is, so Google, of course, had created a lot of press and had made some great impact with AlphaGo. So what's the next thing after AlphaGo?
It's a remarkable achievement. Our DeepMind is the team which worked on it. And to me, if you look at, it's inspirational for me to watch a system like that. And for people who play either Go or chess, advanced way, people would say the system has an intuition to it, or it can make moves which most humans have never done before. So I think it's exciting to see that face of it. My sense is you tackle more complex tasks, maybe something with more of a real-world characteristics, limited information, and so the next set of stuff. And so I'm sure the team is constantly looking for newer challenges. So I can't wait to see what they do next.
Excellent. With that, I think we conclude the fireside chat, and now we would ask Sundar Pichai to sign our guest book, and Christian Thomason, I think, will come to the stage as well for that, and for a photo, and we thank the audience for the question, but most in particular, let's again thank Mr. Pichai for this very informative discussion and a lot of insights, both professionally and personally.
Thank you. Thank you. Just here.
Okay, now we take a group photo with the audience in the back, so you also
Okay.
So people are very impressed.
Yeah.
Let's look into my camera, smile nice and friendly.